BBC Radio Scotland.
Well, there's another level of excitement here in the Blue Tent at Heriot's as our next guests have taken to the stage. I'm extremely excited to be introducing a very special guest to the show today. Dr. Brian May is a man of many talents, with musician and astrophysicist being just two of his occupations. Today, he is joining us on the show as a photographic historian with Professor Roger Taylor, who's releasing his new book, George Washington Wilson, Artist and Photographer. And that's today, documenting some of 19th century Scottish photographer pioneer George Washington Wilson's captivating Victorian photographs. Please welcome Professor Roger Taylor and Dr. Brian May. Welcome to the show, both of you. Let's start with yourself, Roger. What's so special about the photographs that are in this book?
Well, they're amongst some of the earliest photographs of Scotland, and particularly the Scottish landscape. In particular, what is magical about them is they're in 3D. You can see them in the third dimension. And in the back of the book is a little viewer, and you can look at these photographs and go back to these very spots when the photographs were taken in the 1850s. And
you can see, you know, it's a real fascinating insight into how life, predominantly in Scotland, was. But Brian, how did you first learn of this man, George Washington Wilson? And what was the process like documenting his work?
Well, I came into this as a collector really many, many years ago of stereo photographs in general, and I got attracted to the very beginnings of the art, which is the 1850s, about 150 years ago. And I met Roger at an exhibition at one of the London museums, and we kind of collectively bemoaned the fact that there was this wonderful exhibition of photography over 150 years, and there were no stereo photographs at all. So we became friends, and Roger became my mentor over the years, and he still is. And he kind of converted me from a kind of geeky collector into someone who actually gets into the depths of what photography actually is saying. So that's it. But these stereo cards, I mean, you need to see the book perhaps, but the stereo cards are about this size. It's radio, isn't it? This is not good. But they're a few inches across and about 3 inches high. And what they do is you have two pictures on this card, and it looks just like two flat pictures, but if you put it in the stereoscope, and this is my stereoscope, which you get in the book, in the back of the book, your eyes perform that magical function of combining the two images, and you get this 3D perception. And it's magic. It still is magic 150 years later.
See, I'm of the generation that remembers going to shops in the high street and looking at the Viewmaster, looking through like that.
Same principle.
It's the same principle.
Exactly. And Avatar in your local cinema is the same.
Well, we've grown up now. This generation that we have, 3D is not necessarily a new thing. It's all around us. We have the virtual reality headsets that we attach to our phones. But Roger, it was so groundbreaking at the time.
Absolutely.
It was. How difficult a process was it?
Oh, well, photography itself wasn't straightforward. I mean, in the 1850s, one of the things you had to make was your negative. You couldn't buy them. You had to make them on a sheet of glass, and you had to coat the sheet of glass with a special solution called collodion. And to do that, you had to pour it on in a dark tent, and it gave off fumes of ether. So it was not a very pleasant process. And you were in this tent, and you then sensitised that plate and had to then expose it and process it, all within about 5 minutes. So it was an absolutely carefully choreographed process. So each negative was a handcrafted, labour-intensive process. For Wilson, I mean, one of his great difficulties, particularly in the Highlands of Scotland, were midges. You can imagine this very, very sticky substance. There he was in his tent, and these poor midges were flying around, getting bemused by the fumes of ether, and would land on the sticky plate, and you have to scrape it all off and start again. But it was an absolute handcrafted process. And so, you know, that's what Wilson became good at doing. He was a master of that technique.
It's all explained in the book, how it's all done. And there's fabulous drawings documented his time. He photographed royalty, and he was obviously a prolific photographer in Scotland. But you're here in Edinburgh, and Edinburgh features a lot in this book. I don't know how long you're up for, but are you going to get a chance to go and have a look at some of the areas in which he photographed?
One or two.
Yes, we're planning to do a bit of that.
Because there's one we're here in Heriot School, and there's literally just across the way there's the Vennel, and there's a photograph in the book where he spots the castle, which I think is a great example of what we're talking about, because you have the castle in the background and the Vennel. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, Wilson was a master of composition as well as the technical side. As an artist, he was able to compose in 3 dimensions instead of 2. So he would, if he's taking a picture of a castle, for instance, he'd make sure that if the castle was in the distance, there was some stuff in the foreground which would give that 3-dimensional effect, and it adds to that kind of feeling that you're there. I mean, you really do feel when you're looking through these stereoscope viewers that you could walk through the window and you were there with these people.
And it's looking back in time, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's like a time machine.
Yeah.
One other thing about that is that Wilson, unlike a lot of photographers, they just wanted light to make an exposure. No. What Wilson wanted to do was have light which described the subject. So he would always wait until he got the right lighting conditions. He would wait for the right time of day, for the right kind of sky conditions. That's what he made his work special, made it stand out. A lot of photographers, there's enough light, I can make an exposure. For him, it wasn't about that at all.
The whole process. Brian, I mentioned earlier that in addition to being a photographic historian, I believe you're also an accomplished musician.
I'm working on that.
Yeah, apparently your band is not too shabby. You're also an astrophysicist, amongst other things. You've got so many fingers and so many pies. I mean, do you feel there's a connection between all these fields in which you find yourself an expert in now?
In a strange way, there is a connection in my mind, I think. But I think it's more about trying to be a complete human being. And I think that's my kind of residue from being a kid when I was told that I could not be an artist and a scientist at the same time. Like, you have to choose. And I always resented that. I thought, why can't we all do everything? So I've kind of come full circle and I'm able to do all this stuff. And the thing which really consumes more of my life than anything now is trying to get a fair deal for the rest of the creatures that we share this planet with. That's become, part of me being a human being as well, to recognise that we're not the only important species on this planet.
Well, it's been an absolute treat to have you both on the couch today. Tremendous honour to have photographic historians Dr. Brian May and Professor Roger Taylor with us. They will be presenting the newly released George Washington Wilson, artist and photographer, with the OWL 3D projection system, which is there.
Holding up as
we speak. So you can enjoy that for those who were lucky enough to get tickets for the sold-out event, Picturing Victorian Scotland. It's at the Baillie Gifford Main Theatre tonight at 5 p.m. And they're hopefully going to fill a bit of time going to see some of these spots in Edinburgh as well. It's all part of the Edinburgh International Book Festival's Scottish Ideas series of events. Please show your appreciation to Dr. Brian May and Professor Roger Taylor.